Hello, everybody. Welcome to Coffee Time with Byron. I am your host, Byron. Alongside me is former UFC fighter and other promotions, Chris Brennan. But first, before I get involved with him, I got to tell you who I am partnering with on this podcast for the second episode. And episodes in the future, which I'm very proud of. Podcast One, I know you've heard of them, and I got to give a shout out to them and the sponsor betonline.net. So if we got an interesting round of college tonight, get your bets in. Got pro tomorrow. You got Monday Night Football. You even got the baseball going on. You had UFC this morning. I mean, so get your bets going. It's a pleasure to be partnering with them from here on in. So go to betonline.net to put your votes in. But now let's get to it. Thank you for joining me, Mr. Brennan. How are you tonight?
Awesome, sir. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So let's get started. I gotta ask you the first to put you on the spot. The first question I gotta ask. We were talking about it via text before we ever got online. Tell us a little bit about your podcast for those who are watching and listening that want to listen to it, and where can it be found at?
So it's called the Strangler Podcast. Since I'm the West Side Strangler, it's all over. It's on Spotify, on Apple, on YouTube. You know, regular places. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I've got a lot of good stories and a lot of good insight on things. So that's why a lot of people were interested in having me start one. I have had issues getting the bigger name guys. You know, I've gotten in contact with them and everything, and then it's just kind of everyone's kind of flaky, which is weird because I know I'm not a huge name guy, but I've said yes to anybody that's ever asked me. You know, I've gone out of my way to do podcasts for anybody, and I just can't imagine. I was just telling my friend tonight, I was like, no matter how big I would have gotten or could have gotten, I would have never changed as far as that goes. So it's a bummer, you know, a lot of times when I struggle to get some of the bigger name guys, but it is what it is. It'll grow. I'm going to stay with it because I love doing it.
Same. And again, thank you again for accepting my invite because honestly, I have the same problem you have. Granted, I don't know as many people as you do since you were in the industry, but I am grateful and thankful to everybody that I have had on mine. So
Yeah.
I appreciate it, and I do appreciate your time for
Yeah,
it.
of course. Of course.
So how many episodes are you in?
I think we just did like the 29th, but we do a lot of pre-fight predictions and post-fight ones. I've only had like I think 5 or 6 guests so far.
And who was your latest one, and what did you guys talk about?
Sean Patrick Flannery. He's actually the star of Boondock Saints, but he is also a jiu-jitsu black belt and super great guy. I've known him for a really long time and had him on. We had a great conversations about a lot of his acting stuff, but a lot of jiu-jitsu stuff and my kids competing and stuff like that, and his kids, training and competing now in wrestling.
Now, is that show different than the Boondocks that's on Adult Swim? Is that from the same concept that he's in? Is that different? I know you've heard of that show Boondocks before.
I don't know.
Really?
He does. Boondock Saints is him and another guy, super strong Irish accents, and they end up killing guys. Like guys were trying to kill them, and he smashes that toilet on top of a guy off of a balcony at the beginning. Yeah. Crazy stuff, but it's a really, really good movie. And
I'll have to check it out. I thought it was something related to the Boondock series.
I don't think so.
Swim.
I don't think so.
So now tell us, you told us a little bit about your nickname because it's in your podcast.
Yeah.
Now, how did that name come about, and how did you get that nickname?
So UFC 20, we are in I want to say Mississippi, I think, or Alabama. Mm-hmm. And I cornered Tito Ortiz when he fought Guy Mesger that night.
Mhm.
and also
I remember that.
and cornered Jeremy Horn when he fought Chuck Liddell, when he choked out Chuck Liddell.
Mhm.
And after Tito, we went back to after he got into it with Ken, and that's the time when they like lifted Tito up and turned him around. I think John McCarthy lifted him up and turned him around, and Ken was hanging over the top of the fence yelling.
I remember
Well, we
that.
went backstage to this room, and we end up locked in a room that was like half the size of my kitchen for a couple hours because all of the Lions Den guys and a bunch of the Hammer House guys were after Tito. And it was like
Mhm.
me, Tito, my friend Jeremy, and like two other people locked in there, and we couldn't get out because they were trying to fuck all of us up, and no one was like, it wasn't, we were way outnumbered. So what happened was we got police escorted over to the hotel, but when we got to the hotel, they were all outside waiting. And my buddy Jeremy, Mikey Burnett was there. And do you remember Mikey Burnett?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. And I said,
Fighter. Good
yeah. And
fight.
I said, hey, I said, if this goes down, I got Mikey. And my buddy goes, oh, that'd be awesome. The East Side Assassin versus the West Side Strangler. And I was like, oh, that's a sick nickname. And it stuck. So Tito jumps off the bus, runs upstairs, gets his baggage, comes downstairs, and goes on tour with Korn and leaves all of us to deal with it.
That's funny because I remember, like I said, when you say that, and that's how that happened when you first got that nickname. I remember that even though I wasn't even though I wasn't in the UFC at that time, I just remember like when I first started watching it in the early 2000s. I
Yeah.
do remember like highlights of that. Like that was a legit
Dude,
rivalry, like
big
being
time.
back in the
Big
day.
time.
Like Tito, I mean, boy, could he back it up, but he really hated Ken Shamrock in the Lions Den.
Yeah, I mean, you know, both of them are so hot headed, it's crazy.
Man, and it took just, I mean, obviously he respected Metzger at the end because, I mean, they shook hands and all
Yeah.
that. But Ken, oh,
The,
after that, like,
the problem was Tito put on a t shirt and when he turned around and said, Gay Mesger is my bitch.
yeah, okay, yeah, I do remember that. Yep.
And Ken lost his mind.
He
You know,
lost
Ken
it. Yeah.
lost his mind. Yeah.
But he always did that to anybody he fought, though. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah. He's a WWF guy.
yeah, I think he meant it in good spirits, though, Tito, because he always respected the fighter and he shook their hands after. So I think it's all just sayings that he did on the back of his just to hype himself up.
Yeah.
And and you would think Ken Shamrock wouldn't have a problem with that because, yeah, like you say, he went to freaking WWF,
Yeah.
which fake as can be.
Right.
So I mean, it's perfect. But yeah, like after that, I mean, after that incident, then you never really heard from the Lions Den after that because after that beef with Tito, what did the Lions Den really do? I mean, they disappeared. Did you? I mean,
I think Tito fought Ken 3 times, huh? And he beat the crap out of him all 3 times.
All 3 times, and then they fought again at their older age, and I think it was Bellator when Bellator was just coming up. They fought again, I believe.
Wild.
So yeah, let's start with obviously you've been around, so I gotta ask you about your 3 fights that you had with Pat Miletich in the UFC. All close fights, all good fights. I saw every single one, as I told you. What do you remember most about those fights, and what did you gain most out of fighting Miletich?
I mean, they were really, really early on in my career. It was my 4th, 5th, and 7th fight, and it was like his 24th, 25th, and 27th fight. He had, he had a lot of experience over me. I think he was ranked number 1 at the time, one or 4, something like that. But he was like one of the top guys, And the first fight, we went to a 20-minute draw, 1 round, 20 minutes, and I was like, okay, I can hang with this guy. Let's fight again. Yeah. So I kind of talked to the promoter, his manager, Monty Cox, a little bit and kind of talked a little shit. And 2 months later, we fought again. And we went 30 minutes straight, 1 round. And I lost a split decision. And then again, 2 months later, we fought in the UFC lightweight tournament. And I ran into him in the finals and he choked me up against the fence. I was a blue belt at the time. I was very very green, very inexperienced,
Mhm.
and he was just better than me all around. And I just went after him. I tried to go after him as much as I could. I was kind of fearless back then, and went and just try to fight him as best I could. His striking was better than me, but I would chase him on the feet, throwing strikes, getting him to take me down, just so I could try to use jiu-jitsu on him. But yeah, it was early. I improved a lot. I got tough from those fights. Got a lot of, people don't credit the experience you get out of long fights like that early on in your career, and I'm grateful for those because his fights made me who I was for sure.
Now, obviously, he's started his own camp, which had a who's who of fighters come out of it,
Oh yeah,
ranging from Hughes, Sylvia, Horn,
Pulver.
Pulver, yep, and others I'm not naming, but I know there's tons of others.
Yeah.
Now, after you fought him, you were, like you said, you were just a young lion coming in. After he fought, you guys fought. Did he ever did you ever stop to think maybe you could train with him possibly, or any of that about maybe?
Yeah, probably the biggest mistake in my career is not traveling to train with other guys. I had my own gym, and I end up, shortly after I opened my gym, I ended up getting married, had a baby,
Right.
and so on and so forth. So I never really left to go train, except I would go like Big Bear for the last couple of weeks of my fight camps, which was still close to home, but I always had my own fighters with me. And so that was probably like the biggest mistake I made. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of people traveling to other camps. There wasn't like camps to travel to and to do that with. But I definitely we were super cool after that. That's how I cornered Jeremy Horn a couple times for those guys when they weren't there. And we got along really well. He's a good dude. Respect him a lot. He ended up being the 5-time champ off of that night. So yeah, I would have liked to, yes, but no, I never did.
Now, according to this, you can tell me if this is wrong or not, but according to Wick, you were in 3 different divisions: middleweight, welterweight, and whiteweight. Now, how much of a cut or how much did that affect your weight? Because that's like 30-pound difference in those weight classes. How did it affect you as a fighter?
So for the most of my career, I fought at 170, and that was okay. I still had about a 15-pound cut to 170, and then I was scheduled to fight Sakurai in Shudo, and they asked me to fight him. I said yes, and I had 8 weeks to make weight. And I was big. I had just fought at 170 and blew up afterwards, went to Japan for somebody else's fight for Rampage and Sakuraba, I think. And I came back and I was big, like 206. And I said yes. So in 8 weeks, I've got to make 167. Like that was their 170 over there. So I start camp, getting lighter, and I hit. I'm 4 weeks in, and they call and say that Sakurai got injured and asked if I would fight Gomi. And I said yes. And then I got off the phone, and my brother was like, "Hey, dude, Gomi's a 55er." And I was like, "Oh, well, they know I'm a 70, so maybe he's moving up." And he goes, "I don't know, I'll call." So he calls back and like, "No, 55." And I was like, "Yeah, I can't make 55." And my brother was like, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Bro, like I cut so much already to 70, and it's 15 more pounds." And sure enough, we just said, "Yeah, we'll do it." And so in 8 weeks, I went from 206 to 154.3 and fought Gomi. And it was a great fight. It was actually my favorite fight. I lost a split decision there as well, but it was my favorite fight. And I felt like in the United States, I won the first and third round. And but regardless, I was bummed, but it was another great fight against the best guy. He was number one in the world at the time. And I always, I never said no to anybody. I always got those big fights because I would fight, anybody. And I hung with everybody. So that was the most important thing to me, is just put on a good fight. And it's different now that my kid's fighting. We fight to win. We train properly and do everything to win the fights. But I just fought my ass off with what I had back then. And so from that point, I fought a couple more times at 55, and then I moved back to 70. Got invited to fight in Pride. I fought in Hawaii once at 185, and then I got invited to fight in Japan in Pride, and their weight class was like 183. They didn't have the lighter weight class yet. So my first two fights there were at 183, and then I fought once at 61 there, 161. And that was kind of all over the place. But I was big. I mean, I'm short. I'm 5'8", but I used to walk at like 195, 190, 195 with a lot of muscle.
Before we get into Pride, which I see that you were in as well, like you just said, you went over there. You said your son is into it. Does he want to be like you and fight in the UFC or any promotion? What has he been scouted yet?
He's 7-0 in Bellator right now. Yeah, he's ranked number 10 in Bellator right now. He's a stud. Honestly, what's that?
I'll have to tune into that.
Yeah, his name's Lucas Brennan, Skywalker. Okay. But he is super good wrestler, crazy good jiu-jitsu, good striker. And we've been going up to Glory MMA in Missouri to train for this next fight coming up in his camps and stuff. But yeah, I mean, he's going to be better than me, no question. He's already on the right track. He's 3-0 as an amateur, 7-0 as a pro, all in Bellator, ranked number 10, and just climbing.
Hey, that just goes to show you trained him well at first before he went to somebody else.
He's still training with me. I'm his head coach. We just go there for the training partners. You know, he gets a great room up there. They've got 50 guys on the mat and 20 guys in the UFC every day. It's wild. Good training there.
See, you trained him well. Yeah, sure, he may be better than you, like you said, but hey, you trained him. That's the main thing.
For sure.
So there you go. So do you see him winning a championship soon?
Probably 2 years. You know, we'll probably have 3 fights next year and work our way down the rankings. And then, you know, hopefully, you never know once you get to the top 5 who gets the title shot. But, you know, hopefully it's like 6 fights away.
What rank is he now in Bellator?
10.
10? So
yeah, he's number 10. Yeah, he's there.
There you go. So now let's get into Pride. Now, obviously, that ring was totally different than the octagon. Now, tell us about that, fighting in an actual ring, which is like a boxing / WW, F / whatever ring it was.
Right.
Compared to fighting in the octagon or King of the Cage, whatever other promotion you were. How different was it fighting in the cage compared to an actual ring?
Yeah, it was different. I feel like your wrestling's got to be better, more technical, because you can't use the ropes like you can the fence. You can use the corner a bit, you can lean on the ropes a bit, but you're not allowed to, like if you grab the ropes, they smack your hand off. I ran into a problem in my first Pride fight. I armbarred Eiji Mitsuoka, and we were like kind of in the ropes, but he yelled and tapped, and the ref jumped in and stopped us. And then I turned around and walked away with my hands up, and they said, no. And he argued, he said didn't tap, and they made us fight again. And then I Kimura'd and broke his shoulder of the same arm. But yeah, it's definitely different. You have to a little more out in the open wrestling for takedowns and stuff like that, and can't like scoot your way over to the fence to get up. They'll push you back in. Guys stand on the outside and push you back in the ropes.
Now, did you fight with them before UFC bought them out?
Yes.
So, did you fight any UFCers that were over there before they came to the UFC?
Just Gomi.
Gomi?
Yeah, Gomi. Eiji Mitsuoka is another guy. He actually ended up fighting Gomi, I think, in Japan, in the UFC. I forget who else he fought in the UFC, but he came to the UFC. I think that is it that I fought from over there that fought in the UFC. Yeah.
Now, besides the fight, like you said, the lightweight championship that you were part of, did you get to fight for any other championships in your career?
I won the King of the Cage belt 3 times. Beat Joe Stevenson, put him to sleep. Knocked out Antonio McKee, who's AJ McKee's dad. Beat Thomas Denny, armbarred Thomas Denny. I forget. I think I've got 6 wins there and 1 loss to John Alessio.
So I see in 2014 you get inducted into the Mixed Martial Arts Hall of Fame. What is that feeling like to be inducted?
That was cool. That was down in Houston, Texas. Actually, they came and called me and invited me and told me that I was going to be inducted. So that was pretty neat. Went down there with my family and stuff, and that was pretty cool. Cool to be recognized. I knew obviously wouldn't get into the UFC Hall of Fame. Friggin' Jens Pulver's not in the UFC Hall of Fame yet, and he was the first 55 champ. You know,
Right.
But I was super stoked to be in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of UFC fighters that should be in the Hall of Fame but aren't.
No question.
That I'm sure you can agree with that.
No question.
Heck, with the way what's his name? We just talked about him. Oh yeah, Sylvia. The way he was fighting, I mean, come on, he should
Tim?
be. Yeah, Tim Sylvia. The way he fought. I mean, he practically won all of his fights.
No question.
He should be in the Hall of Fame. And yeah, Pulver. That's another one. And I don't know, is Penn in the Hall of Fame? I don't know. Is he?
I don't know, but I'm sure he will be because Dana liked him.
Yeah,
it's all about Dana, bro.
It is. You know, you're right. It is. Yeah. I mean, I got to ask you on that. I've had a couple other fighters on here. I don't know if you've met him personally or talked to him personally.
Oh yeah, we had.
But what is he like as a person? I know he's a promoter and he's got to sell the fights. That's his job. That's what he does. But what is he like as a human being? Do you think he really cares about you guys as fighters? Like, what? Tell us about him.
I mean, if you're making him money, he cares about you, right? We get along now. We're cool now. But my big experience with him was, so I beat Joe Stevenson. Okay, put him to sleep with a triangle. And then he goes on and fights on the Ultimate Fighter and wins the Ultimate Fighter. UFC calls me and wants me to fight Joe Stevenson as his basically coming out party from the UFC or from Tough.
Right.
And they offered me $3,000 to show, $3,000 to win. And I said no. I said, I'm not starving. Right. And
I don't blame you. I wouldn't take that either.
Yeah, I was like, there was no reason to. And I said, and we argued about it. I'm talking to Joe Silva at the time. And he says, I said, what's he making? And he goes, well, that's different, And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, and he was making 20 grand. And I said, I just beat him, and you're going to pay me 3 and 3 and pay him 20. Well, he won the show. It's different. He's in a different position than you now. I said, I'm good. So then, they hit me up the next day and they're like, look, we can give you 4 and 4 and we'll put you on the poster. And I'm like, no. Joe starts talking trash, Stevenson. And he had talked trash the first time, and that's why I put him to sleep. Like a lot of people didn't know why I didn't let go of the triangle. And I held on to the triangle till he slept. Starts talking trash again. So I tell Joe Silva, I said, fine, send over the contract. I'll do it. A month goes by, and I've got no contract. And the Gracie Fighting Championships comes along, and they're putting on an event. And they hit me up and said, hey, we'll pay you $25,000 flat to fight Adam DeSabato. He was actually BJ Penn's wrestling coach. He was an NCAA champ from Ohio. And I said, okay, when is it? And it was 35 days after what the UFC would be. And I said yes. And then that same day they posted it. Joe Silva calls me. He's like, hey, you can't take that fight, blah, blah, blah. You're fighting for us. And I said, bro, I don't have a contract. We sent you a contract a month ago. And I said, so you sent me a contract a month ago and you haven't gotten it back and you're not going to question where it's at? I was like, you guys never sent me a contract. I don't have one. You can't take that fight. And I said, listen, I'm going to take the fight unless you guys are going to pay me a lot more because they're paying me this and you're paying me that.
Yeah.
And he says, no, you agreed, whatever. Dana calls me. And Dana had given me tickets a couple times to the UFC before this.
Right.
And he calls me and is like, hey, you can't take that fight. You're going to fight for us, blah, 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 blah. And I said, bro, like you're paying me 25 grand, you're paying me 3 and 3. I was like, 4 and 4 now. You're offering me. I said, come on. And he argued, no, it's going to do a lot more for you. I said, if I was in a position in my life where it would do a lot for me, cool. I said, but I'm not. I was already. I don't remember how old it was, but I was getting older. And I said, it's not like I'm going to get in the UFC and go on a run right now. Mm-hmm. And he says, he tells me not to take it. I said, I'll tell you what. And it was I was married at the time. It was my anniversary. I said, I'll tell you what. I said, give me 2 good seats for the fights this weekend, and I'll do it. Mm-hmm. He goes, I can't really. And I went, and I hung up the phone, and that was it. So the next day, he posts on the Underground Forum, Chris Brennan's a fucking bitch. And so I didn't see it because I left to Big Bear to go start camp. Okay. I go to Big Bear, and by the time I got there, this thing's like 20 pages long of people talking shit, mostly to Dana, because he's the CEO of the company, doing this to a fighter, right? And I jumped in a little bit, and I was like, fuck him. He goes, oh, no. He said, if you don't before this, when we were on the phone, he said, if you don't take this fight, you're banned from the UFC. You'll never fight for us again.
Right.
And that's when I said, okay, hook me up with 2 tickets. He said, no, I hung up. I don't give a shit. So during all this, it goes, it's wild. It's, he talks trash. I don't know if he responded in there very much. Everybody else did. And I end up coming out looking better than he did. Mm-hmm. And then however long later the fight was, I went to the UFC to watch the fights. When I'm walking by the pool at Mandalay Bay, the people from Pride were there and said, hey, Chris, come here. And I sat and talked with them. I ended up signing my Pride deal at the UFC. I was just like, it was so great. Yeah. I was like, oh, yeah, big time. And they paid way more than the UFC.
Especially when, at the time, like you said, they didn't buy Pride at the time. Yeah. So
no, it was all UFC.
Fuck you. That'd be a fuck to them.
Yeah. And I went over there and got paid, much better. And yeah, it was cool. I got to fight in Japan for Pride.
There you go. And now, how would you say your relationship with Dana is now? Have you?
So then, years later, somebody said something on Twitter, and I replied, and my name was in it somehow. I don't know why. And I replied, and I said, "Tell me you love me, Dana." And he replied, "I love you, bro." And then, so we messaged back and forth, and he hooked me up with 6 tickets that following weekend to the UFC 125 with Frankie and Gray Maynard. Mm-hmm. And me and my brothers went, and me and Dana met up, and we're cool. And he's actually hooked me up since then. I sat second row at the Adesanya Whitaker fight in Melbourne, Australia.
There you go. I mean, at least you guys mended for now, but wait until your son until he tries to get your son.
Yeah, the only way that happens is if something like Michael Chandler happens, where he's like gets the belt and they're offering like 800 grand or something crazy. Otherwise, man, he has no plans to leave Bellator. He makes very good money there. Right. He makes his own sponsorship money there. The people at Bellator know who he is. He's not lost in a sea of 1,000 fighters. They treat him really well. We would prefer to stay there and fight and win and defend that belt.
Now, obviously, there's them. There's Professional Fight League, and there's what's the other one? One.
Yeah.
Where a lot of those former UFC fighters go. Now, do you see any of those shows outdoing UFC at all?
It's so hard, man, because they were new. They were the number one show for so long. It's like somebody else trying to now come and start a new football league and outdo the NFL. It's very difficult just because they've been so built up, and it's what the mass public knows more than the rest. It'll be hard. I love the fact that Bellator is now getting a lot of good UFC fighters. They got Corey Anderson, who came over on a win streak, ranked number 4 in the division. There's Yoel Romero. There's a lot of good guys switching over to Cyborgs there now, and they're not the tip-top guys in the UFC, but they're big name guys, and that's what they need. They need big name people for people to start following, to see them fighting there, and just kind of start to catch on and more. But a lot of it's advertisement, man. The UFC, you see it everywhere, and I think it just needs to be pushed in front of everybody's face as much as possible. Have great fights, but not just great fights. They've got to have, people have to know the fighters, otherwise they don't watch them. Like I rarely watch the undercard unless there's someone on it I know. And now I'm watching it a little more now that my son's fighting a lot, so I'm watching kind of everybody just to see everyone's style, what's working, what's not working. The calf kick's a big thing. So a lot of the stuff that's new that we do in training, I just kind of keep an eye on everything and see what's what.
See, yeah, that's where I gotta say I kind of lost interest in it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still like it. I got the UFC Fight Pass. I watch all the old fights. But once the old names and all that all I remembered watching it in a day, all of them retired.
Yeah.
I don't really know anybody anymore. I mean, it's like hard to get back into because all of them are leaving the sport.
It's crazy. I'll watch a card now and know maybe one person on it. And I'm like, what? There used to be a time where if somebody said I fought in the UFC, I could say, bullshit, you never fought in the UFC, because I knew everybody. But now I'd be like, maybe you did. Like
exactly.
Maybe you do now. I don't know.
Exactly. It's weird because I know, of course, I know some of the names still. Obviously, there's John Jones, the guy who just fought at this one today in Abu Dhabi, Oliveira.
Yeah.
I think that he's in another promotion. Never mind. I was thinking of McDonald, but he's in another promotion. There's a bunch of other ones I can't think of right now on the top of my head. But yeah. Other than that, though, most of the fighters are just brand new, and I don't know them.
Yeah.
And yes, I regret not tuning in earlier to see these fighters because I'm sure they're pretty good.
They are.
I'm sure there are.
For sure.
But it's just how I grew up watching the sport, and then they all of a sudden retire or just disappear off the UFC scene.
Yeah.
I just kind of lost interest. So it's like what you just said too. I mean, I'm sure you agree with me on that too, because you just said it yourself. You hardly know anybody.
Yeah.
It takes you a while just to get back into it.
Oh yeah, only the main guys, Otherwise, there's so many people and so many foreign guys too. And they're not from here, so I'm trying to figure out who's who. There's like 19 guys with the last name Nurmagomedov. It's crazy. So, but yeah, there's a lot of good guys. There's a lot of good guys in the PFL as well, and there's a bunch in Bellator. There's a bunch in ONE. There's a lot of great guys that just everyone gets seen in the UFC at the moment.
Yeah. So if you theoretical, obviously I know you're way far retired, but if you were to come back fighting today, like pull a Randy Couture, who would you want to fight? Who's the one person you would want to fight, and why would you want to fight them?
Someone that's fighting right now, or anyone?
Anyone.
Pat.
You would want a rematch?
Yeah, bro. I was a blue belt when I fought him. I'm a fucking 3-time jiu-jitsu world champion, now a black belt.
I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that. It'd be the final fight. Yeah, I'd like to see that.
I mean, I like him, obviously, and he doesn't owe me a fight. He beat me. But yeah, I would love to run that one back just for the sake of doing it.
There you go.
For sure.
I'd like to see that. I'd pay for that fight.
Yeah,
hell, you see these Paul brothers. I mean, which I can ask you now. Granted, I kudos to them. Kudos to them for being big, they're making money. That's what I mean. That's it. Well, that's them. Kudos to them. But honestly, I just don't like the way how he's. Well, who is it? Yeah, Jake. How Jake is doing it, because he's fighting all old guys.
And then talking shit like he's beating somebody.
Right.
And none of them are even boxers.
Right. Why don't you fight somebody your own age and that's actually going through the sport now? I get you want to promote yourself, and I appreciate the way you got there, but look at who you fought. They're all retired, and you got. I mean,
And they weren't even great strikers in MMA to begin with. I mean, Woodley had good knockouts, but he's not a boxer.
Exactly.
And
So what's your
freaking,
take? What's your take on that? Do you like are you like me? Like you respect how he's doing it, but just wish he would fight somebody on his own playing field.
for sure. And I think he's now gonna, everyone still thinks Anderson's gonna to smoke him. He can box, bro. Like, even though he's an idiot, and he's making millions, he can box. And he's a big guy, and he's muscular, and he's young, and he's fit.
This is the first one where he's actually fought somebody that I think is 50-50. One, he can beat because of his age, and the other 50%, I don't think so because, before MMA, he was a good kickboxer before he went to UFC.
Right.
So,
that
could be a good one.
But people, because he got famous on YouTube, don't give him credit. Jake can box.
Yeah, he can.
And he's a big guy, and he's fit, and he's young, and I see him giving Anderson a bigger problem than everyone expects him to, and now all he does is train boxing, right? And he's putting money into his training and his camps and whatnot. So, I mean, I'm not a fan, but I at least got to give credit where credit's due. He's definitely, putting in the work, and people don't have to say yes to fighting him. They do it for the money, right? And so that's why he's able to capitalize on and continue doing what he's doing. But I definitely would like to see him fight a boxer.
Yeah, definitely. So now you were in the age to where women weren't fighting MMA or at all had the chance to. Now, what do you think about that when that first came into play with women actually fighting MMA? Did you like the idea of that, or
they were fighting back then? They just weren't fighting in the UFC. I had girls that fought. There were girls that fought in Hook and Shoot, which is an organization. They had an all-girls show. There was girls that fought in Shudo in Japan. I mean, it's definitely different. And I'm not. There are some good girls, and then there are some girls that, like I was discussing Caitlin Kagan on my podcast, who lost tonight, but she has, out of, I think she had 18 or 19 wins, she had 16 decisions. And I was like, clearly she doesn't have power, right? She's lasting, and whatever. But I picked the other girl to win because of it, and she a lot of girls don't have that, so you got to watch them. Everyone's not a Cyborg or an Amanda or any of those monster punching girls. Plus, you end up there's not enough of them to spread across the weight classes. You've got Kayla Harris in PFL, who's a 55er. You've got Amanda, who's a 35 or 45er, and then you've got Cyborg, who's in Bellator at 35, 45.
I think 35.
Yeah. No, 45. She's a 45 because she beat Julia Budd for the belt, and Julia was a 45er also.
Okay.
But so they're all spread out everywhere. You don't get the best fighting the best. And so people can, like Kayla can claim that she's the best, but she's literally not fought anybody. And she could be, but she can't claim to be when she's fighting there. When there's other girls in UFC and Bellator that she hasn't fought. So I don't know. It's cool. I've got friends, that fight that are girls, and they're good. They just they're hard to be a big draw, and I think the UFC does their best to promote them. But like Valentina, she would be my favorite fighter because she fights the most like a dude, if you ask me. Like, she's got wrestling, good striking, good solid ground game, and she fights the most like the guys fight. And so I enjoy watching her fight, but for the most part, it is what it is.
Now you had that little cup of tea again back after you left the UFC. You fought. Now tell us, how did this fight come about? against Gil Castillo at UFC 35. How'd that come about?
So after Gil was the King of the Cage champ when I wasn't there for whatever reason,
Mm-hmm.
and I was supposed to fight Gil, and then Gil signed with the UFC, and then he carved his name in the back of my belt. I won the belt right after that, and he carved his name in it. So I won the belt back at King of the Cage, and then the UFC called me to come to the UFC and fight Gil. And he was a big dude, man. He was
I remember him. Yep.
Yeah, super stacked wrestler, black belt from Caesar. And I lost a decision to him. I kept getting taken down. And Henzo, who's a good buddy of mine, was in his corner with Caesar. And the whole corner was constantly, watch out for the armbar, watch out for the triangle, watch out for the armbar, watch out for the triangle. And Henzo was like, man, afterwards, he's like, man, your jiu-jitsu is beautiful, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, lost a decision. Crazy night there. We fought a Mohegan Sun, which was Lucas has fought there now with Bellator. It's pretty cool. But the crowd booed our entire fight. And Dana was screaming at the referee for not standing us up. And then 2 fights later, Chuck Liddell fights Suloff, and they're on the feet the whole time, and the crowd booed the entire time. And I'm like, what do you guys want? Like, we're grappling, they're striking. So all they want is someone to stand toe to toe and throw down, put your foot in the circle and swing.
Because, like you said, at the time they were newly just going to New Jersey at the time.
Yeah, so uneducated, the fans at the time. So it was it was whatever. It was my fault too. Like, I should have been more aggressive and attacking and whatnot. And I just made for a boring fight. It was like literally my only boring fight.
So then you also fought another former UFCer, John Alessio. Tell us about that fight.
So that was a fight. That was my last King of the Cage fight until the end of my career. I fought 2 more times with him at the end of my career, but I did not want to fight John. He trained at Millennia with Javi Vasquez and Romy Aram and Batiste and all those guys, and they were all our friends, and we all trained together a lot. And we tried to avoid that fight for a long time, and they ended up, I think it was a super fight. I don't even think it was for the King of the Cage belt. I think it was for a super fight belt. And man, we fought. We were boxing. Crazy story. We're swinging, and I'm parrying, and we're literally back and forth. And he throws a right hand, and I covered like this, and I got hit right through here in the temple. Boom. And I leaned back against the fence. And the next thing I know, the referee's stopping the fight. And I'm looking at Larry Landless, who's the ref, and I was like, "What are you fouling him for something?" And he goes, "What?" He goes, "No, shush," like that. And he's like trying to make me be quiet so I didn't embarrass myself. And he tells me to look at the Jumbotron. And he hit me 22 times, bro, while I'm standing like this. And I didn't know any of them. I only remember the one. And I stayed standing. And as soon as I stopped punching, I put my hands down. And I was like, "What's up?" And I was totally fine. But there was like a 20-second gap that I never got back of getting hit, or I wasn't defending myself, I guess. And I watched that, and I was like, "Is that right now?" He goes, "That just happened?" It was so weird to watch it. I was like, "Holy shit!" So yeah.
Now I've got to ask you. So Larry Randless was a good referee, and so he was in the UFC along with John McCarthy and them.
Yeah,
good referees. I got to ask you about that. They're in a tough spot. I know they know their stuff, but they're honestly in a tough spot. How do you take that being as a ref? I mean, you got to, even though I know you know your stuff, it's tough when you know
being a ref.
Being a ref, yeah,
super tough.
There's been a lot of fights where you just don't know, like he could have gone or he could have not go. I mean, when you're in there and you've been in the cage, obviously, what do the refs tell you, or what do they look for to end a fight? What does the promotion tell the refs to look for?
Yeah, I mean, defending yourself, right? I guess the number one thing is to be able to defend yourself. Since I'm a fighter, I would rather err on the side of letting it go a little long than a little short. 1 or 2 more punches isn't going to kill me, but stopping the fight a little early sucks because you've seen guys come back. You've seen guys come back from something, and if they get rocked, they may get hit and come right back to it, and they're okay. So I would rather it go a little long, especially because, like, if you're fighting in a large organization, a loss sets you back a lot. Like, you get set back half your purse for the most part.
Yep.
You're if you're in line for the belt, you're now 2 or 3 fights back away from the belt. Because there's other guys waiting as well. It's just such a big life. It changes the trajectory of your life at the moment of your path of where you're going. So it is not. I would rather go a little long than a little short.
Did you ever have a fight like that was stopped too early that you thought you?
No, I don't. Not that I can think of. All my wins, I had 21 wins. 19 were submissions, 18 were in the first round. So, but that was just kind of, I was gonna win or lose probably early. Besides, like, a handful of decision losses that I had, I only won one decision. It was against Steve Berger, and then I had one knockout against Antonio McKee, and then the rest were all subs.
Now, I gotta ask you. We talked about a little bit of Ken Shamrock. He was the first to go to WWE, and then it was what's his name, the Beast,
Dan Severn.
Dan Severn. Yeah. You as a fighter, do you respect them going into the wrestling game? Because I know they start out as wrestlers, but do you respect that in them going through the fake stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I don't care after after they're done fighting. If there's money to be made somewhere, that's cool. I don't like what I don't like is, like, take Brock Lesnar, for example. He comes from wrestling and jumps right into the top of the game, fighting for the belt.
Yeah, I didn't like
That,
that either.
you
Yeah,
know, I'm not a fan of that, just because I'm more, you got to earn your spot in
yeah,
the sport, right? Like, Bo Nickel right now is calling out, don't put me on the prelims or I won't fight, and calling out the top guys. And, bro, sure, it'd be nice, but you don't deserve it. I
right,
don't care what you did in wrestling. It's not MMA. I
right.
don't care what you did in the WWE. It's not MMA. The problem is, whatever sells tickets is what they're going to do. Whatever puts asses in the seats is what they're going to, favor towards. So it happens.
I
But
agree with you, and that's what I hated about Lesnar when he
yeah,
first.
you still there? Where'd you go, bro? Are you still there?
All right, sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. I'm still waiting for him to get on, but thank you for staying with us. I'm trying to get him back on now. But I am going to conclude this part of this episode. Once I get back with him, we'll get back on again. But until then, there's going to be a part two. But right now, I got to conclude part one because part one's almost over. So stay tuned to part two. All right, sorry. Yeah, I'm glad you're back and stayed in. I don't know what happened. My computer just, I don't know what, I don't know what happened, but it just took the crap.
No worries.
But I'm glad you're back. So, as I was saying, because we got into little bit about Lesnar. But yeah, that's where I agree with you because when he first came into the UFC, like you said, literally like that, he got a title shot, and he only had what, one or two fights,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then
He got footlocked by Frank Mir real fast.
yeah, and then he won the title.
Yeah, that was a bummer.
It was. But I know he tried putting the UFC on hold again because he wanted to come back. He wanted to do both. But I know Dana White wasn't having it. And plus the drug test or whatever he had and all that medical issue stuff. So I'm glad Dana didn't bring him back. So I'm just happy about that.
For sure.
But yeah, you're right. It all depends on who makes money, unfortunately. I mean, look at Conor McGregor for instance. Look how much he's done,
Oh yeah.
and he's still in it.
Yeah. He's making them a lot of money. He makes a lot of money. I actually just was looking the other day. His fight with Dustin Poirier. Poirier's base pay was $5 million, and he made 1.5 in pay-per-views. Connor's base pay was 1.5 million, but he made 23 million in pay-per-views.
Yeah,
So,
and for all the crap he does.
yeah. He's definitely making a lot of money.
Like the one, who was it that he was supposed to fight? I think it was Khabib again. Before that, remember the backstage issue with the bus?
Yeah,
that hurt other fighters' purses. I guarantee you, if you were a fighter, you wouldn't have liked that. Planned or not planned. Honestly, I think Dana should have got rid of him at that point. But
Connor.
yeah, with what?
Oh, bro, he jumped on a plane with 20 guys and flew from Ireland to New York just to fight Khabib in the parking lot.
I know. Like, come
Crazy.
on.
Yeah.
And he hurt other fighters, and he took fights away from their purse.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I don't respect that. Like,
what about John Jones?
Yeah, that's true. He does the same thing too, but I mean,
he's not hurting other fighters, but he's hurting people outside of the cage, and he's hurting himself outside the cage, and he's having all sorts of issues.
Very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, these other promotions that I gotta ask you now, since we got on to these other promotions, I gotta ask you: is there, out of all the promotions, I know there's fights happening all around these promotions. Is there any in UFC, like we just talked about, had a pay-per-view this morning in Abu Dhabi?
Yep.
Was there any fights from that card that interested you, and are there any other fights from other promotions that are coming up that interest you?
I mean, there's a bantamweight Grand Prix that's going on in Bellator that I enjoy watching right now. Some great guys. There's a Patchy Mix, a guy who's on there. He's a stud, really good fighter. There is Danny Sabatello, wrestler guy. He's fighting God, what is his name? Super good wrestler, little explosive dude. I can't remember. Anyway, super exciting tournament that's going on. The UFC, there's another one coming up. 281 has got Frankie Edgar, his retirement fight against Chris Gutierrez. Friends with both guys. That's going to be, I think they both have a clear path to victory. They just have to implement their game. Yeah, there's always good fights to be made now. There's a lot of good fights happening all the time now, but just yeah, I really only watch. I'll watch PFL when it's on just because Rory was there for a while, and I've known Rory since he's like 14 years old. He's a black belt under one of my black belts, so I watched PFL when he was over there. Otherwise, I really just watch Bellator and the UFC.
So, I gotta ask you now. Obviously, the Gracies started and they wanted this sport to go places. Hence, the first UFC. Do you think the Gracies now, or do you think they ever realized how big the sport was actually going to turn out to be?
No, I'm sure they don't. They obviously profit off of it still by creating, having all their gyms, their jiu-jitsu gyms and everything everywhere. But if they knew how big it was going to be, they wouldn't have sold it when they sold it. I mean, them and SEG and whatever, they sold the friggin' UFC for $2 million, right?
Yeah,
And so I doubt. I'm sure they knew it'd grow, but not to the extent that it has.
I agree because it first started like you said SEG, and then they didn't want it. So then that's when Dana and them sold it for like what you said, two mil, I think.
2 million. Yeah, they bought it for 2 million, then went 40 in the hole, and
Yeah.
then came back to where now.
Now I've gotten into it with a couple of the fighters I've had. Do you know anything about this, or if it's even solved yet? This lawsuit going on. Do you know anything about that
Which one?
between the UFC and former fighters?
Oh, I mean, I know. I don't know if it's even gone. Has it gone even to court and stuff yet?
I don't. I think so. I think one of the fighters I had on recently. I'm not going to name names, but I think he said it's making progress.
Okay.
So I think they're getting more money, but I'm not 100% sure. So
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I don't know. Unfortunately, I'm not involved in that.
were you ever part of came across it? Anybody ever ask you about that?
No,
Well, that's good. Okay, so
no.
that took you out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, no, nothing with me.
there you go. There you go. So now, back to your son. I know he wants to. Obviously, he wants to be a champion,
Yeah.
but um, has he told you a fight that he really wants to take right now, or
No.
does he want the promotion just to give him whoever they put in front of him?
Yeah, he's just taking them as they come. Like we've got a fight 4 weeks from now, 4 weeks from yesterday, in Chicago, and then against a guy named Nick Talaveras, who's very tough, tall, lanky guy. Then we turn right back around in camp and fight February 24th in Dublin, Ireland. And after that, that's when our top guys start coming. We start fighting the guys that are under us in the rankings. Anywhere from nine down to one. And like I said, hopefully that takes place over a four to five fight period. I'm in no rush to jump him from not 10 to 4, um, and neither is he. He knows, we know where he stands. We know where he'll be when. We've laid out his career pretty perfectly, and it's played out so far how we planned it. So the plan is to kind of keep trucking along and keep doing the same thing and getting to where he's supposed to be.
Now, two questions before I let you go.
Yep.
Obviously, rivalries make the sport better. Um, is there one that stands out to you that you enjoyed watching the most out of all the rivalries you've witnessed? And the second part to that question is, did you have any rivalries in while you were fighting?
I mean, the only thing that would be a rivalry for me would have been Pat because we fought 3 times. I didn't fight anybody else multiple times. I always wish that fight took place later in my career when I had more experience.
Mm,
But again, it was always and besides the first two, we kind of talked trash back and forth a little bit in the so-called media at the time. Um, it was a good rivalry. We were cool to each other, and then became friends afterwards. As far as other rivalries go, man, that's a tough one. I was always I liked the Chuck and Tito deal.
that was
That was an old one, but I liked it. Misha and
good.
Ronda. I wish Misha would have beat Ronda, but you know, it is what it is. Um, yeah, I don't know. There's been a lot of them.
Yeah, there has been. There has been. I agree. The Diaz brothers against GSP. Those were some good ones.
Yeah, for sure, for
I mean,
sure.
I miss those ones.
The
Those
Diaz brothers have a rivalry with everybody they fight.
yeah, exactly. Now that leads me to this bonus one about that before I get to the final one. Where do you the other one just had a farewell fight, I guess supposedly, or a last contract fight with them. Where do you see him going, or do you see him retiring?
I mean, he thinks he's gonna go box, but bro, he shouldn't be punching the head ever again. I'm not gonna lie. Like he's not a genius, he's not. They've both been punched in the head a lot of times. And to go into boxing now where they literally only punch you in the head or the body, it's I think it's a tough move, but honestly, man, if he gets to go over there and make some money, go ahead. Go do it, but I would just be careful just because you don't want to take a lot of damage to the brain, and he clearly already has.
Oh yeah, by far.
Yeah.
So now I ask this to everybody I have on the pod. Obviously, you coach your son, and I think you're still coaching, right? You still have your gym. You're still coaching.
Yeah, I
Um,
teach every night unless we're out of town coaching my son, and then I've got another son that wrestles D1 who's going to fight when he's done in college.
So I gotta ask you, what do you tell your students, and what would you tell people new to the game that are trying to get into it? Uh, how to succeed in it?
I mean, first of all, pick a good gym. Pick a good gym with good coaches. Um, I'm a big fan of training separately. I'm a big fan of having taken jiu-jitsu classes, taking Muay Thai classes, taking wrestling classes, learning the art separately instead of just learning the art of MMA. That's why everybody's fights basically look the same these days. It's a fight to you get a knockdown or a takedown and just fight for your life to get back to your feet. It's basically a striking match, with some takedowns here and there. It's kind of killed the jiu-jitsu. Everyone does jiu-jitsu to defend and get up. I think that's why my son's got a lot of subs because his jiu-jitsu he's still training jiu-jitsu for finishes and gets a lot of subs, and he's got 5 first-round subs in Bellator. And so I think it'd be best at least for the first however many years to learn the arts separately and then combine them instead of just going out and training MMA as one. Then you're just kind of pretty good everywhere and not great anywhere. And I think it's good to have a solid foundation. Wrestling is one of the probably one of the best ones to learn. It's the hardest.
And now, the last one, seriously, before I let you go, last bonus one. I gotta ask you, out of all the fights you've seen, I know there's many, but is there one particular fight? And you can say yours if you want. You can say yours if you want. It don't matter to me. Is there one that you remember the most and like the most, and why do you like it the most?
I mean, in my opinion, the greatest fight of all time is Robbie and Rory. Um, Robbie Lawler and Rory McDonald in the UFC was a crazy, crazy, crazy fight. But it was a 5 rounder, ended in the middle of the third or the middle of the 5th round,
Mm.
and it was just a all out war. But they were technical the entire time. It wasn't sloppy. It was crazy that it was for sure one of the best ever. Um, yeah, I don't know. That was a great fight. Chandler and Gaethje was a freaking crazy fight. You know, those are good for the fans. Not my style that I would want to the way I would want to fight or want my kid fighting.
Right.
You know, those take the toll on your brain cells, and so I liked a lot of fights in Japan just because there was a lot of grappling that took place in Japan and in Shudo and in Pride. Carlos Newton, I don't know if you remember Carlos Newton, but Carlos Newton was always a great grappler, man. Always fun to watch.
Kamehameha Man, Dragon Ball.
Yes. Yeah. My two favorite fights for myself was my Gomi fight and my Steve Berger, my decision win. Just because I got to really beat him up for 3 rounds. It wasn't a first round quick fight. I got to fight a lot and show a lot in that fight.
Perfect. I couldn't have said any better. I do appreciate your time again. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you very much.
When we get off here, I'm definitely going to stay in touch with you.
Cool.
Send me that stuff so I can check out your pod.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the Strangler podcast. You can find me on Instagram, Chris, just under my name, Chris Brennan. My son, Lucas Brennan, also is the one who's fighting Bellator, and he's got a fight coming up on November 18th, Bellator 288.
Hey, you might have to get him on so you can tag team.
Yeah, you should get him on. He's great.
Yeah, just bring him on, and you can even be on if you want.
Cool.
The 2 of you.
Okay. That'd be sweet.
That would be. Hey, talk some MMA. Why not?
Right on.
And also, if you know anybody else, send them my way as well. So,
will do.
More. I appreciate it. It was fun. I'll stay in touch. Send me that info so I can tune in. And there you go.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night and take care.
See you, sir.
Right?
Yep. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, this concludes episode, I think, 103, 104, somewhere around there. Thank you again to Podcast One and betonline.net for sponsoring the show. Appreciate them. And if you need all your bets, go to them for all the games coming up, either tonight, tomorrow, Monday. Hockey, etc. is back open. Basketball is now back. UFC still in. You got all these bets going. Go to them for all your betting needs. So I do appreciate them, and definitely for Podcast One. So take care. This concludes episode number 103 with Chris Brennan. Take care and have a good night. That one went longer than expected because the freaking computer did it the fuck again.